Okay. So I've made a change to the syllabus here on this day. Originally we had been slated to have an online meeting on this evening, but I decided that I would let you all have the evening off because I know that we're getting close at that point to the deadline for turning in the collaboration plans and the resource map for this course, and then all of the question sets. Some of you have been kind of submitting your assignments, your responses to those question sets as we've been progressing. I've noticed that some of you might be holding off a little bit. But anyway, to make a long story short, I thought it would be beneficial to you all to have the evening off just to focus on the work that's still to do for this class. And I sent out a message via Canvas to you all, so hopefully you received that. One other update is that if you go to the files section for this course, you'll notice that I've added a collaboration consultation plan rubric. Just to provide you all with some guidance as to kind of how I'll be rating your work for this activity. And I don't know why it's not opening. I'm just going to try to download it real quick. So there are essentially four different areas, domains in which you'll be rated. And we won't go through this in detail right now. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it is now available for you all to have a look at. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and let me know. You might notice, or you might recall that this assignment is worth 100 points, but you see here that the values for each of these different levels of the rubric go from 1 to 4, so just disregard those because they're not accurate. This is actually the rubric from TaskStream. Since the collaboration plan is one of the TaskStream assignments, I just went ahead and pulled this off of the website and popped it onto our Canvas site. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me.
Jared?
Yes.
Is this the only thing this term that's going to be loaded up to TaskStream?
Yes.
Or anything else loaded up there this term?
No. Just a consultation and collaboration plan will go on TaskStream for this term.
Okay. Okay.
And then, yeah, in the next term, there will be nothing either. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this.
Jared, what was that exact date? It was the 20th that you were talking about?
November 20th, yes.
So November 20th and Thanksgiving, there's no meeting for either class.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, I thought that you all would appreciate it. I know that there's still a lot of work ahead of us in the term, and having a few evenings off to get caught up on it is always helpful. So, okay. Today, since we talked about last week, or not last week, the last time we met for this class, 2 weeks ago, we're able to get through chapters 1 and 2. Today we'll just be focusing on chapter 4, which discusses effective collaboration, or effective communication. Communicating effectively, I should say, for collaboration and teaming. And so mostly what I've done for this evening's discussion is to pull a few quotes from the textbook that I hope we can use to generate some discussion. And then I have a couple different activities that we'll do on the topic of effective communication in the context of collaborative relationships. And then I wanted to discuss the idea of positive communication in the context of IEPs. And so we're going to talk about, take a bit of time to discuss strengths-based IEP goal development. So let us jump right in. So this chapter opens up with a statement that I think, it kind of summarizes the entire goal of this chapter. Communication that minimizes conflict and enables teachers to maintain self-esteem may be the most important process in collaborative consulting. So 2 components here. 1, communication should minimize conflict. 2, communication should enable teachers to maintain self-esteem. And my question to you all is thinking about kind of these 2 facets of communication in the context of collaborative relationships. Does this type of communication look the same in all the different types of relationships that we might engage in the context of the collaborating that we do as educators? So for example, communication that minimizes conflict in a teacher-student dynamic. Does that look the same as communication that minimizes conflict in a teacher-parent dynamic or a teacher-consultant dynamic? And so I was hoping to get some of your thoughts on what you think about this.
Well, I speak differently to students than I do to adults. So, I don't talk down to them, but I do want to make sure that what I'm saying is clear, and
Right.
they don't have the same vocabulary that an adult does. So, of course, I do talk in a different way to students than I do to adults. It can even be the same for parents to some extent, depending on the education that you have with them or their education, because there are some parents who, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but some parents do struggle.
With some of like the technicalities
Yes.
or just kind of the
Yes.
understanding of the
Of the jargon and stuff that we're talking about, yes. And some parents actually require help with someone communicating for them because perhaps they have a disability that makes it difficult for them to communicate.
Good. So you bring up good points. I mean, obviously, communication that is going to, minimize conflict, or if we just think about communication in general, it's obviously going to look different when it's between an adult and a child versus, an adult and other adults in different professional roles. So that's a nice, obvious distinction. Amy, you brought up a good point because, the book does talk a lot about, challenges in communication that might be presented given cultural differences, but the book doesn't really talk about level of education, and I think that's important to understand. And I'm wondering if you might be willing to share an example of that, if you have one.
Yes.
Off the top of your head, the tip of your tongue, I should say.
I do. I have a parent who is ID,
Okay.
and that parent actually has an advocate through a program that is offered, and I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head, and I can't. But there's a program actually that will do communication and assist parents who are in this situation and make it so that they can understand exactly what's happening, because the child also has ID,
Mhm.
is identified and as intellectual disability, and we want to make sure that the parent knows what's going on. And the best way to do that is through this, what is the name of it? Do you remember, Kim, the name of that? Or Jessica, you guys, can you think of the name of that
Is it
program?
Direction Service?
It's not. It was, I can't remember, but it's specifically, it's probably through Director Services, but there's a specific program that will actually do the communicating to help these parents understand. They go to all the meetings, they actually go to parent-teacher conferences for the student, and it's just, it's a really good program, but off the top of my head, I can't think of the name of it. I will probably include it in that project at the end.
Yeah. It's on that sheet of resources. I can't remember either right now.
Good. So this advocate is in IEP meetings then, alongside
Yes.
the parent.
Yes.
And so, and when you're communicating with the parent in the context of one of these IEP meetings, do you direct your communications to the parent or to the advocate?
Well, I always talk to the parent
Right.
because that's who you're supposed to talk to. You don't, I'm not, it's the same thing with if you have someone signing or someone who's communication for maybe a second language. You only,
Right.
you're actually speaking directly to the person you're talking to, not to the translator.
It's a sign
So,
of,
yes.
it's a sign of disrespect.
That's right.
It assumes that the parent, you know, is kind of less able to comprehend, even if they are, you know, hindered
Right.
by language barriers. So that's a good point. And so what are some of the strategies that this advocate uses? Like how does she or he help this parent understand?
Just lays it out very clearly, which we could probably do, but it makes the parent feel like she feels more secure having this other individual there, you know, and the individual also will, if she notices that maybe something needs to be done and the parent doesn't understand why that's happening, she can explain it even better than we can probably. I mean,
Right.
it's just, it's a really good tool and I really like it.
Has anyone else had experience working with parents? Not necessarily, you know, who might have disabilities themselves, but who might be from different cultures, and kind of experience challenges in communication.
I used to teach 4th grade ELL.
Okay, so many of your parents then, or many of the parents of your
Yes.
students.
Most of my parents, yeah.
Okay. And did it present challenges, or did you feel that you know, kind of your communications were, you know, getting through to the parents through the third party interpreter?
No, you know, our interpreters were fantastic and members of our community as well. So I think that community connection was really critical to our communication success for sure. And just like Amy had mentioned a moment ago, I just talked directly to the parent themselves. And I would send home, because I'm not completely fluent in Spanish, so I did need an interpreter. And I would send notes home, though, which were easy to produce. And so we had a nice written communication going back and forth between several of my parents. So you know, communication was then in more than one format. And so we had our challenges, but most of the time, it's pretty effective.
Good. So leaving parents and students aside for the moment, how about communications with your peers, other teachers, whether general education teachers or special education teachers, or, you know, other related service providers, SLPs or OTs, or even administrators? Do you find that you ought to kind of change your communicative style depending on who you are communicating with when you're dealing kind of with these peers who are, you know, essentially on par with you, so to speak? Or do you feel that there's more of kind of a shared kind of level of understanding?
So I just have been having an issue lately that I wanted to talk to my principal about, but she wasn't there at the end of the day because I have a teacher with a kid of mine in her class, but she's like very old school.
The teacher
So
is.
the teacher is.
Okay.
And she's very rigid. And so it's really like, a lot of times she'll just like talk about this kid to me, like, this kid's so manipulative, this kid's so whatever. Like he just is like, he knows exactly what he's doing. And he's a second grader.
Yeah. No.
And I know the kid, and he's not being manipulative and like calculating. He just is having tantrums. Like she's thinking that he's throwing tantrums on purpose, but really he just like doesn't have very good emotional control. But I feel like I can't, that's why I wanted to get advice, because I was like, I don't even think I can, just like with her history and stuff, it's like, I kind of just listen to her and like, don't really say anything back. Because I'm like, if I say anything, it's going to be an argument.
Okay.
Whereas like I have other teachers I work with that I feel like we're more on the same level, so I can be honest with them, like, hey, you should try this, or maybe try this. But I don't know. It's almost like she's coming in like wanting to have a fight about it. So I kind of like just try to avoid the fight.
Yeah, so very set kind of in her personal and professional ways, kind of unwilling to consider alternative interpretations of this child's behavior.
Yeah. So if anybody has any advice for how to talk to those kind of people that you have to deal with, let me know. Because I know everyone has people like that you work with that you have to deal with. But yeah, I never know what to say.
Right. So you just kind of...
I kind of nod and then I just do what I want anyway, which maybe isn't the best thing to do. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad for the kid too, because she's sort of mean to him.
So she kind of targets him maybe because of her perceptions of you know, his calculating behavior.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, if you are intuiting a potential, you know, argument or, you know, kind of battle, it's wise to seek out the guidance of the principal before, you know, attempting to kind of breach the situation or deal with the situation.
Well, and part of it too is that I know that the principal and then we have a part-time vice principal, that they're both aware of the situation because she has gone to both of them complaining about this student. And I talked to the vice principal and was like very frank, like, hey, this is not just the student, like her and the student are in a constant power struggle. And I'm not having any of the same issues with him, and neither are other adults who interact with him. It's only her that's having the issues, but she's not seeing that she's contributing to it. And the principal and the vice principal both have said that they see the same thing. So I know that they're aware of it and they're like aware that it's an issue. So that's part of it too, is I don't want to say anything without like talking to them first, because I know that they're already talking about it.
Right. You don't want to kind of circumvent the hierarchy, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, no, you know, it can be a very difficult situation when you know, from your perspective, why something is happening is like so obvious, or somebody's perception of a situation is kind of so wrong, but you don't feel, you know, safe enough. Well, maybe safe isn't the right term. You don't feel maybe qualified, as it were, enough to bring this to that individual's attention. So does anyone else have situations similar to that? Marta?
I have the similar situation with one of my teachers right now. And I feel like you, because I've tried to give her examples of what to do and how to work with this child, and, you know, how to, when she talks to him, she talks to him in a way that is condescending, and he's a kindergartner and she's the same thing. Well, I think he knows what he's doing. I think he's doing that on purpose. And, you know, that whole mentality. And she came into education after she had been in a different line of work, and came into education, got her master's in teaching, and did it that, came in that way. And so she and I have had other problems where we've had conflicts, and so I've seen how she kind of works with other people, and she does the same thing. I've had aides come to me in tears because the way she talks to them makes them feel like they're about 2 years old. So I've had to kind of really bite my tongue. Mm-hmm. And what I've told my aides is just, you go in there, I have him take a clipboard, and I have everything on there listed down there that she's wanting them to do or that we're doing with that child at that time. And I say, you go in, you say, excuse me, I need to get this child, and da-da-da. So I'm training them how to work with her. Now working with her with this child, I've had to, like I said, bite my tongue a lot. And unfortunately, my principal is someone who's learning to be a principal.
Okay.
And he kind of thinks that she's doing everything right because he likes things very controlled.
Okay.
So when he goes into her room and she has all the kids sitting at the table doing, all this little work, he thinks that's just like the perfect class.
Right.
And so we're having problems with that. So I've been working on her understanding that she has to give more positive rewards to this child than you would normally do. So she's beginning to do that.
Right. Maybe even like
But
creating situations that will allow her to give positive reinforcement to the child. Simple
Yes.
things.
simple things. The other side of that is when she doesn't realize that people are kind of listening once in a while. So she'll say something, well, I'm really or I'm so sorry you didn't get to have a book from the library today. If you would behave better, you would have gotten a book just like so-and-so did. That kind of jabby thing, constant. So
Yeah.
we're trying to come up with a way. I've got to come up with a way, and so does the other special ed teacher, that we can help her see that without being, like you were saying, her losing her self-esteem.
Right.
For her to feel like we're attacking her. Because at the beginning, she and I it was pretty bad at first.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I wish I had better words for you to give you some advice on how to work with someone like that, but it's very challenging. And sometimes what I've done is also gone in and just tried to say, oh, I really do like the way you're doing this with the class today. Or so look, and I'd walk around and I kind of help out in the room and try to get her to see what I'm doing, modeling reinforcement to the kids while she's working with other students over at the other table. But not all teachers are going to let you come in their room and do that.
Right.
Yeah. No, she does sound really similar because this teacher does the same thing. This is why I'm starting to get more and more uncomfortable because she is like mean to this kid. Like she'll like say things, yeah. And she'll like instead of setting up situations to give him positive reinforcement, she's like setting up situations to be able to like grab at him.
Right.
And it's like
just pushing his buttons so that she can vent.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's really frustrating. And so, yeah, I just feel bad for this poor kid. And he already like has a hard enough time because he does have a lot of emotional issues. So I'm like, man, I don't want him to like just hate school.
Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating because this little guy was doing pretty good, and then she just kept jabbing at him, and it was when I had a teacher retired teacher who was helping with assessments, and she was sitting in a room that right next door, so she could hear everything. And she and I are good friends, and which is probably terrible to say this, but she came up to me and she says, she's setting him up. She literally sets him up. You leave the room, you've got him in there, he's doing just fine. You go back, and she's literally setting him up, and within 5 minutes after you leave, she's done everything she can to get him to blow out. So what we've had to do is I kind of gotten it where I can arrange my aides so that I can have somebody almost with him almost all the time. So now she doesn't have an excuse, and he gets to stay in class, and the aide just pulls herself way back, and he's fine.
But the question is does she know that she's doing that? I mean, I think from like your perspective, it's very obvious, the things that she's doing are, not the appropriate ways of communicating or engaging with this child. Maybe she doesn't even realize that the role that she's playing in the situation, the way that
I agree. I agree because I don't think she even realizes how she comes across when she talks to other teachers or the aides, the parapros.
Right.
Right.
Especially if you're seeing it at not just with a student but other teachers and the paraprofessionals. I mean, it's just a facet of this woman's personality. Personal characteristic.
Maybe I just never would have put her in kindergarten. I mean, she's got a lot of talent, and I will say that she's got a lot of talent. But she's that person who just, it's my way or no way. And I'm right, and this is how I see it, and these are the way I raise my kids. My kids are doing great, so therefore this is it. And I hate to say it that way, but that's what I feel.
Yeah.
And it's hard, very hard. So we've had to make some compromises. The principal decided to put the student on a partial day, which I wasn't agreeing to, but he and the parent agreed to do it. So already he's doing just fine, and we were already talking about, and he's only been like 2 weeks, I think, on this program, and I'm ready to give him, start increasing his time anyway.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was going to be a long-term solution to anything. The idea was, I think for her, she had her mind made up before he walked in the door of that classroom that he was going to be a problem because of things she had heard.
Right.
So she was not cutting any slack at all.
Her assumptions, maybe her personal experience, her previous personal experiences create these biases that, just put the two at odds from the beginning. And so certainly we all have our different values, the things that we perceive as important in educating students, beliefs about the appropriate ways to go about doing that. Maybe we even have stereotypes or, assumptions based on our personal experiences or previous experiences with certain people. So these can all serve as filters of language. And so the textbook talked about this idea of a filter of language being, well, how all of these factors kind of play into how we perceive communications from other people. And so I'm wondering, have you had any of your assumptions or previous experiences kind of challenged when engaging with students? Like, think back to earlier in your careers when you started working with kids with disabilities. And we all go into this work with a certain set of assumptions based on what we've read, how we've been educated. And I'm wondering if any of you have experiences in which you went in with a set of assumptions, started working with a kid with a set of assumptions, and this kid changed those assumptions. Anyone care to share an experience such as that?
I'll share. I recently had a student come from another school into my school. I looked at his IEP beforehand. Another teacher had worked with him in another school, and he had a lot of behavior issues, refusal to do work. As soon as they saw his name up there, like,
oh, we lost you, Jessica. Can't hear you, Jessica. Jessica, can you hear me?
he's gone through in the past. The kid shows up and like, is this even the same kid? Like, this is not, he was nothing like that.
So the person was a different individual than the stack of paper describing that person.
Right. And even when it comes down to the student's behavior, there's a lot of stuff going on, and he's just choosing not to engage in it, and really kind of taking a back seat and taking advantage of like calming spaces. And Yeah, it's a totally different person. Even those teachers that said that about him, they're like, I don't know, this is a totally different kid, you know.
Yeah.
And so you can sit there and you can look at through all their paperwork and everything and hear what other teachers say, but until you have that kid in your class, it kind of just reaffirmed that for me. Like, don't make assumptions.
Right. You know, well, it's important to kind of inform yourself. You know, if you have this trove of, you know, background information on a student, sometimes it's, you know, it seems more effective just to kind of set that information aside first and just kind of meet the kid without really knowing anything first. You know, in the work that I did as a therapist, an ABA therapist, kids with autism, we work with a family, and mother was from the U.S., father was Saudi Arabian, and their son, he was 7 years old. He was very high functioning, very intelligent kid, but could be very violent and, you know, could seem like he was being very manipulative, you know. And I was put on this case and, you know, given all this background information, and yeah, and I went into, you know, my first session with him just kind of with these expectations, and having these expectations and biases, I think, you know, can often unwittingly influence how we are engaging with a person. I was kind of expecting, I was just waiting for this kid to like kind of blow up or try to stab me with a pencil or something. And it really put me on edge, you know, and I think to some kids that is palpable. They can feel that tension, and that can kind of lead to escalations. So obviously, you know, in addition to the things that we say, we've talked a lot about the verbal components of communication. Our body language is also very important. Another, you know, nonverbal components of the messages that we communicate. And I'm wondering, how do you think about nonverbal communication? Have you found yourself in a situation in which you were maybe conveying a message with your nonverbal communication that you did not intend to? Do you think about how your messages are being communicated, how your nonverbal communication might be, you know, kind of coloring the messages that you're communicating verbally? We talk a lot about, we try to teach our kids, you know, kind of to be perceptive of these types of communications. So I'm just wondering if any of you all in your you know, experiences have had to like kind of sit down and think about your nonverbal communication and maybe alter it to more effectively communicate, whether with students or peers.
I had to think about that a little bit more. Not with a student necessarily, but with my own child, because she was diagnosed with nonverbal learning disorder, and so, which is like Asperger's, right? So you would say something to her, and the teachers would, I would, whoever, in a firm way. She would flip out. They're yelling at me. They're yelling at me. Why are you yelling at me?
Mm-hmm.
No one was yelling, but that was her interpretation. She didn't do body language well, or vocal intonations. They both right together.
Okay.
So we had to be really conscientious of learning that a huge piece of communication her brain was not getting. And so together as a team, my husband and I had to think about that and how to keep her calm and how to teach her to intellectualize that concept a little bit.
Right. It can be challenging to have to teach kind of these very subtle, you know, aspects of communication that most people just intuit kind of through trial and error and experience, to try to teach them in a structured way. It can be very challenging.
Yeah, I don't know if we succeeded or not, but she's doing all right. So
Well, she's doing all right. Then
doing great.
you
Good.
succeeded to some extent.
Must have, yeah.
Anyone else dealt with somebody? Oh, Rachel.
Yeah, so this is like a different thing, but it's nonverbal communication that I've been noticing this year because this is my second year being a resource room teacher. So this is the first time I've ever had kids for 2 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like a group of like 15 fifth graders, but this is the second year I've had them. And fifth grade, before this I taught kindergarten. And so kindergartners like touch you all the time and hug you and do all this stuff, right? So that's just normal.
Yeah.
But fifth graders don't. That's like not the norm, right? They're kind of like becoming young adults. So I've noticed that this year, it's the second year I've had them. And like the ones that didn't used to like want to give me hugs, like will touch my hand while they're sitting next to me. And like they're starting to do that. And they do that this year and they didn't last year. And I've just been like noticing that like, oh, like this like shows that you're really comfortable with me now because you've known me for long enough.
Establish a rapport with the students and they're opening up and showing that.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
And it's funny too. It's been kind of cool seeing with like the kids that are more like the ones that were hard to develop relationships with, but now I have kind of the best relationships with them, which is interesting. I think because they just don't let as many people in. So once you're in, you're like really in.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the ones that they're like, oh, Mrs. Oliver, like feel this weird thing on my elbow. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to feel this weird bone on your elbow. But it's just interesting that it's like, it's that they're like okay with touch now when they weren't when I first met them.
Right.
So it's really interesting. Yeah.
Anyone else? Thoughts? I mean, certainly aspects of our nonverbal communication can, can contradict the kinds of, communications that we are sending verbally. And so, I think it's very important, especially when we're, maybe dealing with parents, that we're mindful of the, of the importance of the consistency of between what we're saying and what we're doing with our bodies as we are conveying.
I think the touch has been interesting to me because we're in a small school.
Uh-huh. Oh, whoever was talking, I lost you. Okay, well, we'll move on. How about cultural differences? Lori already mentioned the fact that as an ELL teacher, she dealt primarily for some time with only parents who have different cultural backgrounds. Does anyone else have experiences in which, a cultural factor have got in the way of an effective communication or made a potential collaboration more challenging?
We have students who are Jehovah's Witness in our school, and that can be sometimes a challenge because the students are often trying to maybe they feel really challenged not to participate in certain activities because their family doesn't want it, and yet trying to teach everyone to be accepting of everyone, so the other students trying to figure out why can't they join us with Halloween, and trying to making sure that we explain to everyone, especially the students, why people make different choices and it's okay.
Right. No, I recall, so working in the Bay Area is obviously, I dealt with families from all over the world. And one of the first cases that I was put on was with a little boy, and his family was from Yemen. And it was always mom who was at home when I would go to the house to do for our sessions, excuse me. And I'd started in a master's program and decided that I wanted to do like a case study, just exploring kind of this family's experiences, coming from the Middle East and being from a Muslim background and having their firstborn son diagnosed with autism. So just kind of being thrown into this world of special education. I had no idea that, in kind of the Muslim culture that, it's generally like the male who is kind of the dominant figure in the relationship. So like if you are, for example, I wanted to ask them, and I did ask, this child's mother if they would be willing to participate in this study. And, she very quickly said, oh, well, what we need to talk to his father first. And it really made me kind of step back and be like, okay, so, I mean, I very rarely ever saw the father, so I didn't really have an avenue by which to gain access to him to ask him. But it really made me think. And then when I started doing like just kind of the research into kind of like, husband-wife dynamics kind of in that culture, it really became obvious to me that, kind of how I went about doing things was definitely, kind of violating how, one traditionally would be arranging this kind of, interaction with individuals from this, with this religious and cultural background. And also, I used to work with a lot of families who are from Asia as well. And, always, and there was one family in particular who, their daughter she was kind of a bit lower functioning. So, she was learning, but she was learning much slower, than some of our other students that we were teaching. And she was always very concerned with like how her child was performing compared to like the other students that I saw, and would ask me, when you, compared to the other kids you work with, like, how is my daughter doing? And it would put me in a very challenging situation, right? Because it doesn't make sense to even make these kinds of comparisons. Each child kind of learns in their own unique way. And I would try to convey that to her. She never seemed, super satisfied with that answer. Really wanted to hear that, oh, well, compared to, the other kids that I see, your daughter is really excelling. It's really coming along, very quickly. Of course, you can't say that. I can't say that kind of. I can't share that kind of information with her. And additionally, this family, they were always like trying new, kind of like herbal or medicinal like approaches to helping their daughter, and like different like teas that that you would come into the house and like there would just be this very pungent aroma. Like to the extent that I would just like ask, I knew this mom. I'd worked with her daughter for some time. Like, what are you making? I'm just curious. This is a very, it's an interesting aroma. And it was, she was making this tea that like included like a variety of herbs and like insect larvae that like she had read about and was, making for her daughter. And, coming from, my kind of Western background, I was like, whoa, well, you probably shouldn't just be, trying, these random cures that you're finding on the internet. But of course, it really wasn't in my position to say that. I would communicate this information to kind of the person who was my boss, so to speak, just to keep them informed. But certainly, just a couple examples in my experience when kind of these cultural differences, led to kind of interesting or challenging, collaborative relationships with families. So obviously, our goal as educators is to build relationships that are supportive, that are trusting, right? Because that's how we most effectively serve our students. And I'm wondering what behaviors have been central to you all kind of toward this end, building trust with parents and, other teachers that you consult with, building relationships that are supportive of, between your colleagues and yourselves. Has there been one thing that any of you can think of that has really been like quite effective toward this end?
For me, I was kind of listening to all the cultural stuff, and I think there's 3 of us. We're in a pretty small town.
Yeah.
And even in a small town as we are, the culture is very different. And like even at my school, it's completely different than the schools in town. And I think one of the things is when we think about culture, we tend to think of like globally. But the culture, like if I think of my school, London, is not like we don't have a lot of different variety of populations, like Hispanic and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But our culture out there is very different. And one of the things about working and living in a small town is you have to know your people. And one of the things like I've known is that I'm pretty connected in my town. And so I know people, Arena, I know only a few people know what I'm talking about. But so, and then out London is a very different culture, and town is a different culture. But knowing those people and actually just, what we are actually having this conversation like with my colleagues a couple of days ago. Out London, they know who's real and who's not. And when I say real, it's like these people know they're not accepting, don't accept people into their culture very easily. Very impoverished, very low SES. A lot of the research is out there. If you have a kid who has an IEP, usually there's some sort of learning disability in the family. So knowing these families for as long as I have and just having like more of a personal level of conversation with them and being more real about stuff and just not using the jargon, not using any of that, and just being who you are and meeting them on their level is about the only way that I think at least out London, and I don't know, Amy's been at a couple different schools. I know Latham was a little like that too, wasn't it, Amy? But if you aren't, they know, and they won't accept you. And we're having a struggle right now at our school with them not accepting a couple new people at our building. They don't have any trust. They won't trust you. And so they're a very proud community out there. We have families that have been in our area for over 100 years. Our school, well, now that Latham shut down, is now the oldest continuously operated school in Lane County. So I think we're like over 100 and some odd years. So we there's a teacher there that has taught kids, like the grandkids of some of her very first. So like,
right.
It's ingrained out there. You know your people, and everybody knows everybody, and everybody's married to everybody, and there's these connections, and you have to know those connections and know those personal pieces, or they just don't let you in.
Right.
And it's very hard for some people to sit in like the meetings, and they're like, well, this isn't relevant. And I'm like, no, it really is. In a bigger school, it's not a relevant piece. Out where we're at, this is so relevant that if you cannot make those connections, you will never get their buy-in. You just won't.
Right.
Like just being really real with them and just knowing them outside of town and outside of the school building and just understanding the dynamics of all the families and everything where I'm at is really what gets them on board. So,
I would imagine like new teachers that come in to like your district, are they coming from outside of the area, or would you say that most teachers have kind of are from the area?
It depends on the school. So like the bigger schools like Bohemian, Harrison, they'll get them from outside of our community.
Mhm.
And to be honest, at my school, 2 of the teachers live in Eugene, but London doesn't have a very big turnover. We literally have a K1, a 2, 3, a 4, 5, a 6, 7, 8, and me. There's 5 teachers. That's it. And one of them's been there about as long as I've been alive. She's a fabulous teacher. One of the other teachers, he's been there for, well, he was there when I first was there the first time, and he had just started, so it's been about 15 years. One of them has been about 10 years.
Mhm.
There is a newer teacher. He does live in the community though, so he had a little bit more buy-in from the community. He does live in Cottage Grove, and then there's me, who I live in Cottage Grove, and I've known people for over 15 years.
Mhm.
But because those other 2 have been there and they've established themselves and they've made an effort to get to know the community, even though they're from Eugene, they're trusted there. I think a lot of it is based on personality, because there is the one person, and all of our EAs are all from our town, so there's that. Pretty much the only ones is going to be the principal and those 2 teachers. And there is a struggle for people who don't understand our community. There truly is. We are having a struggle right now. So now in town, I know Bohemia and Harrison have a higher rate of people that are not from Cottage Grove. And I'm not sure they have the same issues that we have out London and Dorena, because our communities are pretty closed and they don't let people in very well. I think. And my kids went to one of the bigger schools until this year.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm not sure. Amy, what do you think?
I agree with you. I think the smaller schools tend to have more issues with not letting people in. It's more of a closed off feeling. But if you are accepted wholeheartedly.
And a lot has to do with personality, I'd say.
Yeah.
Personality, yeah, I would assume.
A lot has to do with the personality and how you approach people.
Yeah.
Right.
And the bigger schools in our area, you're right. It just, the people, they accept whoever comes in. And in fact, you don't know everybody at the schools. I don't know all the students in my school because I have over 500 students in that elementary school. The ones I know are the behavior ones and the, the ones who I work with and the ones that are on my radar. Those are the ones that I know. I don't know all 500 students by any means. And there's no way, I don't think I could, unless I was, if it was the PE teacher and you're seeing every student, then you'd know everybody. But in my situation, I don't.
Yeah, no, small communities, yeah, can certainly present an interesting wrinkle in the, attempts of doing what it is that we attempt to do, which is to build these trusting relationships with the families that we work with and support.
Yeah.
But anyway, this has been an excellent discussion. Oh, Jessica, you wanted to go.
I'm from Eugene, and I also work in a rural school. It was my first teaching job ever, and I just want to say, coming in, I got a ton of pushback from kids, and it's just that whole, it's the personality, being honest, being authentic, actually genuinely caring and showing that is, it is the most effective teaching and communication strategy I ever have, and it's really hard. People are like, well, what do you do? It's like, I don't know. Can you teach it? And I was talking to a principal over at the big high school, and she's like, oh, I have some teachers and they want to, be more, establish relationships with these kids. And so they stand out in the hall. They're like, hey, how's it? And I'm like, 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 how's it going, buddy? I'm like, oh, that's not, that's not how it is. They're like, well, how do you do it? I don't. And it's a really hard thing, and a lot of the kids, they see through fakeness and just being authentic and and open is huge.
Yeah. So it sounds like authenticity, openness, understanding, really knowing your audience.
Yeah,
I really like the idea of like the language part that that Kimberly you brought up, like knowing like when you should or should not, be using like these real technical terminologies and stuff like that. Rachel, you were saying something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, Jessica, they haven't learned the trick yet that if you want to bond with kids that are like preteens through teenagers, you just give them a bunch of crap all the time. But in a good natured way. That's what they respond to.
Cool guys. Well, I need to take 15 minutes for this break, so let's be back here at 6:15, okay?
Okay. Anyone making dinner? Yeah, but obviously, I'm good. I have those refried beans.
Amy,
Hi.
can you hear me okay, or am I cutting out?
Yeah, it's kind of in and out. Go ahead and talk to me for a minute. So I can hear
Okay.
it.
So how are you guys doing with all your papers and chapters and all that wonderful stuff?
I'm doing the best I can. It's been hard, especially this last week with conferences. Woo, that was tough.
Yeah, mine, they're
I'd give you a
coming up this
gesture, but
next
I'm not
week.
going to.
What'd you say?
What, Kim?
I said I'd give a gesture, but I'm not going to. Amy knows.
I feel a little overwhelmed myself this term.
Yeah, this is a hard term.
Yeah.
Very tough. I'm glad he's giving us that extra day.
I
I'm
am.
definitely needing it. I need it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I'm feeling frustrated because it seems like all my IEPs happened at the beginning of the year this year and then at the end of the year. And
Yep.
it's just been a mess. Then with
Yeah.
all the transfers and the new referrals, I just felt overwhelmed.
I am too right now because I have like 5 IEPs coming up in the next 2 weeks. And I also have some that I'm doing amendments on because we're making changes to a few of them, especially people who have moved in. And between all of it, I'm doing a paperwork day tomorrow. I got a sub and I have to. There's no way I can do it all. I mean, unless I stay after school every single day until 9, 10 o'clock at night and work, because I'm working every weekend an extra day anyway, and it's just too much. So I got an approval for that, and I'm probably going to need another one next month the way things are going.
Yeah, I hear you because that's what I feel. Feel like I'm getting buried and buried and buried.
Does your district provide you with paperwork days?
If I request, they will. And I got at that point myself. Yeah.
I requested, and I'm really glad I did because tomorrow I am busting it. I have no choice. I have to get it in.
Yeah. So
It's hard.
I want to make sure because I could get a little confused with all of this. Our next assignment that's due is not due until the 30th, correct? There's not one to do this week, is there?
No.
No.
Well, that's actually a good question because I have it as one is due, but if you look at the actual chart in, like on the and I don't know if I was using the updated syllabus you gave me, Amy. So anyway, something was supposed to be due on the 23rd, but if you go into Canvas, then you click on them, one says November 1st and one says November 30th or 31st. So I'm going by that date because
Yeah, there's the October 30th one and then a November 1st one.
yeah,
And those,
so-
and I'm going off of those dates too. I got one of them in, but I haven't gotten the other one in yet.
I
And
haven't. I'll be honest.
haven't got
I
mine in
can't
yet.
this term with all the changes in our district and everything I have to do. I can't. I can't in the amount of classwork.
I get it. It's hard. It's really
Well,
hard.
I just wanted to make sure, because I thought he said there was one due this week when we when we had our meeting last week. And I kept looking for it and I couldn't find it. So that's why I was getting
Well,
confused.
It was originally the Trends and Issues self-selected article said the 23rd,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
but
I
then
just-
that one is now the 1st of November.
Yeah.
I
according
just
to
go
the
by I
Canvas.
just go by whatever the due date is. Oh, here, let me poop my face.
I
in
just
there.
go on Canvas.
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
go by whatever the due date is on Canvas, and that's what I write in my
Yeah.
planner.
That's what I said too.
Because originally I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep on top of this, blah 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 blah.
It's impossible sometimes with all we have going
Exactly.
on. I mean, we're doing the best we can with a full workload plus and going to school. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's
It is
really
hard.
hard.
And so I would say just
And
you know
then
do
you guys
the best
will have
you can.
kids
And
still
if you
at
have
home.
to take and if you have to take a ding on points because it's turned in late, then
I've done it. I
yeah.
don't know if I turned it in. Well, actually, it locked me out. It was
It
was
locked
before
it,
the
yeah, it
locked
locked me
time.
out on the Vaughn paper too. And because I
Yes.
said, hey man, I have my personal life is like there's some stuff going on right now and I'm trying to deal with that. And then
Yeah.
conferences and all that, like it's gonna come in late. Like I just gave him a heads up, it's coming in late. Like and so it was locked out. So I just emailed it to him as an attachment.
Yeah,
And
that's what he
was
had me
super
do too. Because I was
understanding.
like, oh my gosh. Be
Mhm.
2 12-hour days. I'm like, sorry.
That's grueling. It is so grueling. Oh my
It's
goodness.
awful.
Do you
And
guys
you know what's
actually I'm curious, how are your conference as far as like parent attendance, especially Kimberly? Like do they come?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of mine
You know
came.
what?
I
It's
think I
really
had
actually
two that didn't.
surprising how many of them actually do show up. We have so little cancellation on conferences.
Wow.
Because I actually attend as many of my students as possible. Some of them it's because I have to have paperwork signed and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But like honestly, we've maybe and they all rescheduled.
Mhm.
I needed to.
Yeah, and I mean one of them we had today, but it was Jill Hermanson, our speech teacher. It was
Mhm.
hers. She just because she was at Bohemia doing them, so
Yeah,
she
she
couldn't.
can't be two places at once.
No. But yeah, our attendance actually for conference, there's some interesting things. So conferences are really well attended. Field trips always are. Our holiday program, you cannot cancel our holiday program.
Well,
Like,
holiday programs like
dude,
I remember like I started off subbing at London and they were getting ready for the holiday program and it's like a cultural event.
yes,
Yes.
it is. It is. And you
Yeah.
like it was mentioned to be canceled or modified this year.
No.
An
Because
explosion happened.
We're like, no. That and Grandparents' Day is a really big one for us.
That was a big one at
Grandparents' Day
Latham too.
is so huge. Yeah, it was at Latham too, but yeah. But yeah, conferences and both conferences, like
Uh-huh.
not just the fall ones, it's the fall and the ones in February are really well attended. Like
Yeah.
very few people will not show.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's not at Kennedy.
It's not.
No, it's
I
like
wonder if it is at the high school because I mean maybe it's an age thing. I know that they don't have a huge attendance at the high school. I mean,
okay. It might be an age
I
thing.
think it's an age thing, the way that it's set up.
Yeah.
At least at the Cottage Grove High School, it a lot of parents don't go.
Well,
I'm
So
just
you have
trying
to schedule it.
brainstorm ways that like because it's a really effective time, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And figure out
Yeah.
ways to like make it work for our kids and get creative with like.
yeah,
'cause
it's a lot of
it's
times I
so-
get my FBA paper signed. I'll get my testing paper signed. I'll actually hold IEPs. if they're
Yeah,
new
I
to-
did that
I'll
for
hold
two.
IEP. So yeah, it's just a really, yeah.
But it's
trying to
long. You guys are doing long ones too, the long days, the
Yeah,
nighttime
they're
conferences.
like 12-hour days, and then they give us Friday off. Okay, I'm sorry, I just calculated this the other day.
It's not.
When we put on those 2 days does not equal 1 day. It's like a day and a half. I'm sorry. Like, seriously?
I know. It's
Yeah, our
really good.
principal lets us, if we don't have any appointments, like she let us leave. She let us leave a little early because she's like, what are you going to do? Sit around and like twiddle your thumbs? There's no more appointments. No more teachers are coming. You
No,
guys have
yeah, we
already
go
like
straight
more than
until
made
8
up your
o'clock.
8 hours.
Yeah,
So,
straight until 8 o'clock. I had both days. I only had a 20-minute dinner. That's it.
yeah.
I was that busy too. It was swamped.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So I'd like to shift gears now. We've been talking a lot about verbal and nonverbal communications and our kind of the roles that they play in establishing relationships and just communicating and collaborating effectively with teachers, students, other service providers. We've yet to consider written communication. And certainly it wields the same level of power as does our verbal and nonverbal communication. And often, you know, how we write, for example, present levels of academic performance statements and IEPs, the kind of language that we use can communicate, you know, our biases, our assumptions, our predispositions. And so what I'd like us to think about and spend the rest of our time together doing tonight is exploring this concept of strength-based IEPs. Is anyone familiar with a strength-based IEP and how that might differ from a more traditional IEP?
Well, it's focusing on the strengths of the student rather than their deficits.
Right. Yeah, so it's very obvious in the just the title, a strength-based IEP. So let's consider two present levels of academic performance statements here, and they're for Franklin here. Franklin is a second grade student with ADHD and ID. Franklin often has difficulty staying on task and remaining focused. He also has a hard time comprehending and recalling material. Currently, Franklin is on a grade level for math, but is well below grade level in reading. Specifically, Franklin has a hard time comprehending and recalling information read from a text. Because of these difficulties, Franklin is often unable to recall information from both independent reading books and books read aloud. So would you say this seems like a pretty standard present levels of academic performance statement?
It's based a lot on deficits, that's for sure.
Right. So that's exactly what this is an example of. This statement only talks about the things that Franklin can't do, right? Or the things that Franklin experiences challenges doing in the class.
They only mentioned like he is on grade level for math, and that's it. Everything else negative.
Right. So just only one positive highlight there.
Right.
This one's much longer, obviously. And so first we start off with just who Franklin is. He's a friendly young boy who enjoys trains and tall buildings. He is timid in new situations, but warms up to people quickly. He's a hardworking second grade student who enjoys attending school, working with his teachers, and developing relationships with his peers. He enjoys and excels in math. During math instruction, he likes to use manipulatives when working to solve a given problem. Currently, Franklin is working at mastering double-digit addition problems. When given 10 double-digit addition problems, Franklin gets an average of 6 correct. However, when given assistance, such as the teacher drawing a line between the 2-digit number, Franklin is able to solve them correctly most of the time, as long as there are no carryovers. Franklin has labels of ID and ADHD that affect his academic performance because it is more difficult for him to comprehend and remember material, and his label of ADHD makes it harder for him to stay on task and focus for the duration of a lesson. These challenges are often evident during reading instruction. Specifically, he often has difficulty recalling information from both independent reading books at the first grade level. For example, when prompted by saying, "Did blank happen in the story?" Franklin often guesses. It is unclear if he comprehended what occurred in the story. However, when he is given a graphic organizer to write down key aspects of the story and a peer buddy, he is able to more easily recall and put out relevant textual information. Further, when these supports are paired with a text of his choice, he's able to pull out key events and details of the text with little adult assistance. And he is able to recall information from the text more consistently. So obviously 2 very different statements. This one is about 2 to 3 times as long. But what are some of the most glaring differences that you all notice between these? With respect to the language, for example.
Way more positive.
Yeah.
Right.
Shows his strengths.
Right. The second statement really doesn't even talk about Franklin's challenges or deficits until halfway into it. The whole first part of it is just talking about the things that he enjoys.
And what he can do.
What he can do. Some characteristics of him as a person. It's a much more holistic kind of look at Franklin than is this previous one, which is just, you know, currently we develop IEPs to address, you know, the educational challenges that our students experience. And this one very clearly and succinctly, you know, communicates those challenges. So, you know, it may be effective in, you know, directing, you know, instruction or, for example, you know, determining what kind of service or an accommodation might help Franklin. Compared to this example, it's just much it's much less holistic. It doesn't give us any information about Franklin as a person. The second one is providing a more nuanced portrait. It's providing us with some data and even some adaptations that have proven effective in the past. And I'm wondering, when you all are writing your academic performance statements, what side of the fence are you mostly on? Are you trying to incorporate some of this more positive language in them, or are you more kind of succinct to the point in conveying the challenges within each of the domains your students experience?
I'd have to say that we use TyNet, and I don't know what other, you know, so 3 of us use TyNet, right, Jess? You use TyNet? Okay. You do, Marta? So TyNet, the way it's set up, it doesn't really, like, oh, it's got an actual, like, the first one that you have to answer is, what are the students' strengths and interests in the PLEP?
Oh, good. So it's a structure that builds it in.
Yes. So that, and then the next box is the parent box, and you ask the parents, like, so you go from everybody on the team doing all the strengths, and then it's like, what are the parents' concerns academically or non-academic that they have regarding their students' learning? And then you go back to the next box it's a combination of strengths and weaknesses. So you put in there, like, what are their strengths you're seeing, and then, you know, where do they need help? So that's why I would put in all of my data from, like, my reading and my math and writing and all that kind of stuff. But above that, I always put in, you know, their strengths before that. And then, so it's built right in. So, I mean, I suppose, well, actually, I don't know a way that you wouldn't be able to be positive right off the bat. And then the bottom one talks about, like, social skills, behavior, motor skills, that kind of thing. And it also is like, what are their strengths in this area? And then you list their weaknesses below that. So you always are having to do that throughout the whole entire PLEP on our document, in our program, I'm sorry. So I don't know any other system before that, to be quite honest with you. I've always used TyNet. So yeah, it's the way it's divided up.
Right, so just the structure of this software, or this program, forces you to be focusing on the positives.
Yes.
Right.
First, I mean, we obviously need to know where a child is challenged and where, you know, we need to kind of direct our interventions. But that's great that the system that you use has kind of these, you know, positive communication components built into it. Does anyone else use a different system for writing IEP goals? No? Okay. So Franklin was a student in your class. What kind of expectations might you have for him? Had you read that first statement?
But he needs a lot of help from the first statement,
Right,
especially with reading.
right. You just know what he can't. You just know where he's going to be challenged. You don't you don't have any information about what has worked in the past for him. That you might be able to kind of build off of to help him advance in his skills. And certainly that second example is providing all of that data and examples of those previous interventions that have proved effective in his educational career. So how would your understanding of Franklin in each situation affect how you would approach teaching him?
Well, the first thing I saw is like, so with the first thing, I know where he would need help. But with the second one, I would know where he would need help and like how to help him.
And how to motivate him too.
And how to motivate him. Like I know if I got that first IEP and I got that, I'm like, okay, great. Okay. And then the second one, I'm like, all right, okay, I know exactly how to get to this kid. Oh my God, he likes trains in tall buildings. So if he's feeling frustrated, maybe we'll switch. So let's talk about trains, and kind of get him back on track. I mean,
the good pun.
Oh, I didn't even. I'm so punny. I didn't even think about that. But yeah.
Any other thoughts? So then, what influences do you think, like one of the first approach versus the second, might have, on the life of a student or that student's family?
Well, the parents know you care about not only what they're struggling with, but you do care about the student enough to get to know them, and that you're able to actually take a look at what they like and what motivates them. It's much more welcoming. It makes the parents feel like you care. On the second one.
Right. Any other thoughts?
I was going to say what Amy said. That second one, that's where you get the buy-in. Because you can throw all the data you want at a parent, and even me, who I'm data-driven, like, honestly, they don't care. They don't care. They want to know, do you know my child?
Right.
Do you know what works for my child? Do you know what they like? Do you know what they don't like? Great. Now, how are you going to use that to like help them? They don't really care about the numbers a whole lot. At least that's what I have found. So, and I even feel the same way. Like when I apply it to my kids, like I love looking at data, and I'm like, okay, so those are where my kids at. But so, what are you going to do as a teacher to like challenge them or not? Like, what are you going to do for them? Do you really know how to get through to them when they have a meltdown?
Yes.
Versus, like that's that connection that you have to have. So at least I don't know if other people are the same, but like I think that's the most important thing with a parent.
No, establishing the establishing rapport and getting student buy-in absolutely is the most important initial step to be successful in this field. And we already talked about number 5, so we're not going to spend any time on it. And so certainly processes that promote and ensure meaningful collaborations are important. They are an aspect of IDEA. And so by using information that we gather from a variety of stakeholders or team members, including family members, to write these IEP, goals and present levels of performance that offer a more holistic portrait of who the child is certainly going to open the door to more opportunities for meaningful relationships, both with students and with their families. And so this is kind of this attention given to the parent and the student involvement is kind of the core of the strength-based approach. And I was doing some research on strength-based IEPs, and I found a nice little framework that I just wanted to share with you all that I think is can be useful in the future for kind of, really ensuring that the present levels of academic performance that we're writing are, embodying the strength-based approach versus the more deficit model that we saw in the first example. So what is the individual's history? Right, this is important. It helps the team know, critical milestones, what has worked in the past, what has not worked. And it can really serve as the foundation for writing one of these present level statements as part of an IEP. Think about what would be your dream for the student. Maybe this really isn't a question that we consider in the context of developing IEPs. But when we think about, what would we like to see, this student achieve, obviously taking into consideration what it is the student, her or himself, needs to achieve. We need to be thinking about, what's going to be happening 5, 10, 15 years down the road when writing these goals. And it's because the current IEP goals are essentially the foundation of this future success, living away from home, going to university, becoming gainfully employed. And more importantly, to ensure involvement in the transition planning process beginning at age 16. What would be your nightmare for this child? Right? This is going to help us think about, well, what paths do we not want to go down? What are we going to not want to do with this child? What is going to lead to, very poor educational outcomes for this individual? And if we see a student starting to go down this path, well, the team really needs to reconvene and adjust goals and supports as necessary to kind of help the student get back on track. Then who is the individual? Everyone on the team should be contributing a few words to describe the student. We all have our own perspectives and different ways of engaging with students in different contexts. And so we're all going to have kind of a unique outlook on the individual. And so this is an important question that we should be asking ourselves. And then just kind of thinking about how can we narrow these down to a few keywords that are really kind of conveying, kind of the core of this individual, the essence of this student. And then we've discussed this a lot. What are the individual's strengths, gifts, and abilities? This question is going to help us to construct students' IEP goals in a strength-based manner rather than focusing on the deficits. It can also inform present level statement sections for subject-specific goals. For example, math. We learned a lot about Franklin's math ability in that second example that we were not able to ascertain by reading that first example. And so certainly thinking about the individual's strengths and abilities and gifts that are going to give us a more meaningful perspective on how we can help the student, more fully access the curriculum in his IEP. But we always do need to think about the individual's needs. But needs, not deficiencies or deficits. We should never be using, that language really at all in written communications, between, fellow co-teachers, fellow special education or general education teachers, or with parents, with students. But it is important that we know what a student's needs are, because that's what the IEP team is using to develop the types of supports that are going to be required for the student to be successful. Then lastly, thinking about what would the student's ideal day at school look like? What must be done to make that happen? This is going to give us insight into, well, the types of supports that are needed, right? If we are collaborating as a team and thinking about kind of this answer to this question, we're gonna get better at developing successful interventions or educational approaches that are going to lead to more inclusive environments along age-appropriate peers. So just a quick run through of kind of a framework for kind of informing or helping us to think about developing strength-based IEP goals and just IEPs in general, present levels of academic or functional performance. Any thoughts about any of these 7 kind of leading questions? Do any of them seem like they might be unnecessary?
I really like all of them. I think one of the things I have a hard time with a lot of times is at my school, I don't always work with all of these kids. And so to answer a lot of these questions, I need input from teachers. And I've tried all kinds of ways to get that, and the teachers don't always respond.
Oh, are you still there? Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't look like you're talking anymore, but we lost you. Cool. Okay. Well, moving on then. So just a little visual that kind of conveys this idea of the strength-based IEP process. We start with the team meeting, the family, the student, service providers, other stakeholders, to engage in this idea of person-centered planning at the pre-IEP stage, right? This is giving us the information that we need to develop these effective strength-based goals. And then we'll collaborate with our team members using the information collected during the PCP to develop these strength-based present level statements, collaborate further to determine appropriate goals, services, and supports, implement the IEP, and importantly, engage in ongoing communication and action planning with collaborative teams to support students' continued progress and growth. So I thought that it might be helpful. It seemed like a bit of an outside of the box approach to writing IEP goals and present level statements. And in those situations, like Jessica was sharing, if you're not getting the opportunity to work one-on-one with these students and get to know them kind of on the level to be able to answer these questions, well, maybe these types of questions would be useful or the set of questions would be useful for giving to these teachers to kind of give them some direction and to kind of coax out the information that you need in order to more effectively write these types of IEP goals.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Are you going to share this slide thing with us?
Yeah, I'll put it on Canvas when we're done.
Thank you. Because I can take notes till I'm blue in the face, but this is good.
Yeah, no. I'll always put them on Canvas. They're in the slides folder within the file section for our class.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, Marta.
So, since I've been doing this for the district, when I first started, there was no pre-IEP meeting.
Uh-huh.
So it was like you schedule the IEP meeting, I meet with a specialist, the other specialist, we'd write, and the teacher would have input a little bit. We'd talk about the IEP, and go forth from that point. And the parent wasn't included until the day of the IEP. We were at the IEP, they were included in the process then. from what I've been told, they try to do it the other way, and we're not successful with getting parents to attend. Does there anyone else have a problem with that?
Yeah, the parents are only at the IEP meeting, for me anyway.
Yep.
So they're not involved in this kind of in the preliminary stages of the development of the IEP goals.
Yeah, when we get to the meeting, then that's when we include them in the process, because it's asking a lot, especially if the parent's working, to expect them to come to multiple meetings
Right.
to write this. But we
Right.
all are collaborating together to talk about the initial, what our draft is that we're going to bring to the IEP, and then we can totally change it at the IEP meeting if we need to.
Right. And maybe it's not necessary, that attendance or that this information be collected in person. I mean, maybe parents, you could develop a questionnaire that parents fill out that, could kind of, you guys can use kind of during this kind of pre-IEP meeting stage. Because you're right, in the perfect world, all parents would have adequate amount of time to, kind of be devoting to their child's educational advancement, but that's just not the reality of most people's situations. Cool.
I have a
Well,
question.
oh yeah,
about that.
Lori.
Since I'm not a SPED teacher just yet, so I have these wonderful minds to kind of tap into here. So when you come down to having these IEP meetings, wasn't there a law recently passed, I think in the state of Oregon, that said that parents can now utilize IEP time under sick leave?
Yeah.
Or Family Leave Act.
Yeah.
So can we, as special education teachers, inform them this is something within your legal rights?
Of
You know
course.
what?
I did not even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it was like recently passed, like in the last couple weeks. Like
Oh my
that
God.
recent.
Okay, well that's
Um,
awesome.
Yeah, the thing, and it's funny that you asked that, because our district director for SPED is coming to my school tomorrow to talk about planning observations and stuff for me. And that was on my agenda to ask him, like, are we allowed to inform parents of that or not? Well, that's great for family medical leave. My issue with more getting parents there is a lot of them don't have transportation. So that's why I can only get them there like one time, and I can't have the other meetings. And I don't know how other districts work, but we also have issues with like OT comes twice a month, maybe for a half a day if I'm lucky. I've never seen my PT ever in 3 years until a week ago. Never seen my PT. So, yeah, but I did see that, and that's on my agenda to talk to Chad about tomorrow, if that's a thing that we can do now. Is to inform parents and say you can apply for your family medical leave.
Would you
Okay.
email me that information, Kim, when you get that?
Yeah. And yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Cool, guys. Well, I'm gonna end it here for tonight. Thank you all, and I'll put these slides up on Canvas. Any closing thoughts before we head out for the evening? Okay. Well, thanks again for a nice discussion, and we'll be seeing you next week. Good evening.